the conviction of Mr. Rahul Gandhi in a trial court case and a sentence of 2 years and the subsequent disqualification from the Loksatta, they all require deeper examination. Purely on technical grounds, the Lok Sabha Secretariat may be right, because the Supreme Court in a 2013 judgment said the moment a member is convicted for 2 years or more or incurs disqualification under Section 8 of the RP Act, then from that moment that position is vacated. He stands disqualified. He is no longer a member. But when you look at deeper issues, we must recognize conviction cannot be the primary means of political reform. Loksatta movement and I have fought for long and hard against criminalization. We are the first ones in 1999 to come out with a list of criminal candidates contesting elections with verifiable antecedents and standards which are applicable uniformly. That led to litigation by friends and finally the court judgment about disclosure. Then I fought along on behalf of my movement to make the disclosure mandatory before the Election Commission and before the Supreme Court. And we persuaded the then president, the newly elected president, Abdul Kalam, to return the ordinance issued by Vajpayee government which was defective. Of course, the Vajpayee government sent it back within 24 hours. Then we went to Supreme Court and won that case. Finally got a reasonable disclosure law. So my commitment to decriminalization of politics is total and real, like that of any concerned citizen in the country. But disqualification should not be the primary means, it should not be a primary weapon for political reform in a functioning democracy. It must be used with a zero tolerance to crime, but judiciously, sparingly, sensibly, not to undermine democracy. The Supreme Court in 2013 was broadly right in saying that the Section 8(4) exemption from disqualification for sitting members is not valid in the long term. I must give some background to viewers to understand what actually happened. The Representation of People Act had a provision, Section 8, subsection 4, saying that if a sitting member, an MP or MLA, is convicted in a court of law, then that member shall not be disqualified if there is an appeal pending until the appeal is disposed of. Obviously, the intent of that provision, we should understand, is if a member is disqualified immediately, if of an appeal the member is held innocent or not guilty, the conviction is set aside, then what happens in case a by-election is held in the meanwhile? Let us say Mr. Rahul Gandhi is taken as no longer as an MP, Wayanad Lok Sabha seat is now vacated. Supposing the Election Commission now declares a by-election, which is perfectly their constitutional responsibility. Suppose an election is held, somebody becomes a member of parliament, and then within 6 months or 7 months, let us say, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, his conviction is set aside by the appellate court. Then we got into a democratic conundrum unnecessarily. That's the reason why our lawmakers incorporated that provision. What happened was, unfortunately, the Election Commission officials, I must blame the Election Commission, post that law, have implemented it wrongly. Instead of limiting the exemption from disqualification for that particular term to which the member was elected, they expanded it until the appeal is disposed of. In a country where 15-20 years is taken in disposing of appeals in courts, in higher courts, obviously that person could be eligible to contest term after term after term, which was travesty of fairness and democracy, travesty of the intent of the law. Quashing that was reasonable, but Supreme Court went farther. They did not even allow the exemption for the tenure of that member elected to office. They said the whole of Section 8, subsection 4 is ultra vires the Constitution. Therefore, they quashed it. Therefore, that protection required not for the member but for democracy, for electoral process, is no longer available. I think that was a hasty judgment. Similarly, saying that Article 103 need not be applied, the member stands disqualified instantly the moment the trial court gives a judgment, is again a hasty response. This is more like an angry citizen's response on a day-to-day basis when you see the vagaries of politics. People in a political democracy are always angry. And in our country, with good justification, because there's so much wrong with the political process. I have been talking from rooftops every day about what is wrong, about money, power, and politics, about criminalization, about muscle power, about caste and other dividing divisions in society, primordial loyalties being used, about short-term individual welfare measures at the cost of long-term good dominating our political scene, about centralization of power, about abuse of rule of law, and a whole lot of other things. And we have to fight that, but constructively and creatively. If our fight ends up in delegitimizing democracy, if undermining the electoral process, then I think it's a very dangerous thing. The court acted with great haste and anger rather than with wisdom and restraint. Now, my appeal to Election Commission is, for heaven's sake, please do not order a by-election until the appeal is disposed of during this term. It's possible that an appellate court may actually stay the conviction itself, in which case the conviction and the disqualification will not be operative. B, the appellate court, hearing the case quickly, because the courts themselves repeatedly said these cases where the public representatives are accused, they must be held on priority basis. They must be heard on priority basis. They may set aside the conviction or reduce the sentence. Therefore, please do not get into a political conundrum, complicate an already fragile system by ordering a by-election precipitately. B, it will be good in the interest of the country if the appellate court, as a special case, irrespective of the merits of the case, stays the conviction itself so that we do not get into deeper problems. I wish the Loksatta Secretariat exercised greater restraint. They were technically right, because that's what Supreme Court said in 2013. They followed to the letter of the Supreme Court judgment. But sometimes we must go beyond the law and the judgment of a court. We must go by the spirit of democracy and what is reasonable, and in order to ensure that the credibility of the system is not eroded further. Now, beyond this case, all political parties must come together. I have seen cases where well-meaning civil society friends recklessly named people merely on technical grounds that they are having criminal record. I'll give one instance specifically I recall. Mr. Surat Sudhakar Reddy, the CPI General Secretary formerly, you may completely question his policies, his beliefs, his politics. That's our right. But nobody questions his antecedents as a leader, a man of spotless record. Because there was a technical case pending in pursuance of some agitation, some Rasta Roko or some other thing, because there was a case pending, it was a criminal case. He was the only member named from the then Andhra Pradesh Assembly of Parliament as a person with a criminal record. This is laughable. If we do not exercise discretion, discrimination, sensible judgment, we are undermining the whole political process. Let me again reiterate. Disqualification should not be the primary means of political reform. Politics can be reformed by constant effort, constructive criticism, collective, informed dissent, and political parties coming together in acts of wisdom and figuring out what is the best way to resolve our dilemmas, whether electoral malpractices or electoral system or rule of law or decentralization of power. A whole lot of things required to be corrected. But precipitate action, action in respect of elected candidates, elected leaders of major parties, delegitimizing politics or disqualifying them from election is not the best means. It's actually a very bad means, as a general rule. In extreme cases of real criminality, after due process, we must disqualify. I've been always fighting for that. Loksatta will always be in the forefront of decriminalization of politics, but decriminalization of politics must not be delegitimization of politics. It must not undermine democratic process. As a general rule, disqualification must be the last and rare resort. Now the political system must come together beyond this case and figure out what are the sensible steps in future to prevent the kind of conundrum we got into. Otherwise, our democracy will be derailed. Just now we are on the verge of rapid economic growth. The country needs to be united, politics and polarization apart. We require to all believe that common prosperity, better education and income, jobs and health care, and rule of law and decentralization of power, participation of people must be the abiding priorities for all of us, irrespective of politics. The nation must be united. I hope the political parties will come together and figure out a set of solutions to deal with these cases, instead of giving every initiative to the courts, and courts acting sometimes a little hastily, a little angrily, a little recklessly. They may be reflecting public opinion, but courts are not about public opinion. They are about what is constitutionally and democratically sensible, wise, and valid. And we must come back to our senses as a country in order to make sure that our democracy serves our people well.